After 3 years of a rough patch, Japanese and Chinese leaders are all set for a sit-down. Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and President Xi Jinping are meeting in Bangkok. This is ahead of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation meeting that they're expected to enter the dialogue with one motive: to build a constructive and stable relationship.
こうした建設的かつ安定的なこの関係、日中関係を構築していく、こうした姿勢で臨んでいきたいと思います。
It is the 50th anniversary of the 1972 normalization of Japan-China ties, but in the past few years, the two countries have been at loggerheads over multiple issues. The dispute over the Senkaku Islands is right on top of the agenda. The islands are part of the East China Sea, which is controlled by Tokyo, but Beijing claims it to be its own territory, saying it was stolen by Japan in 1895. China's aggression towards Taiwan is another bone of contention. Prime Minister Kishida wants to resolve the Taiwan issue with dialogue. Japan was one of the first countries to condemn the military drills in the Taiwan Strait. Reports say these matters will be discussed in today's meeting between the two leaders. For more on this crucial bilateral meeting, let's now go across to our correspondent Chris Gilbert, who joins us live from Tokyo. Chris, after a rough patch of at least 3 years, the Chinese president and the Japanese prime minister will finally sit down for a one-on-one meeting. What exactly is on the agenda? What can we expect?
Well, you're quite right. It's been a very long time since the leaders of Japan and China sat down for a chit-chat. It's been almost 3 years, in fact. Back then, Shinzo Abe was still Prime Minister of Japan. Today, the Prime Minister is Fumio Kishida, and it'll be the first time for him and Xi Jinping to ever meet in person. They've only ever spoken once before. That was on the phone just over a year ago when Xi called Kishida to congratulate him on becoming Prime Minister. There's been a lot of radio silence since then. A lot has happened since then. There's a lot to talk about between these two tonight. And of course, security is going to be very high on the agenda. And whether they discuss this directly or not, there's going to be a big Taiwan-shaped elephant in the room. Whether they directly bring up Taiwan, that will be the backdrop, because Kishida and his allies in the United States and Washington, his defense-pact partners around the world in Australia, New Zealand, South Korea and so on, have all expressed alarm and anxiety about China's maritime, its naval activities with its military around Taiwan and its claims to Taiwan as well. And there's a lot of anxiety around that, and Kishida has likened the scenario of any potential invasion as similar to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, at one point saying that Ukraine today could be the East Asia of tomorrow. It also concerns about trade routes in that scenario, very important trade routes for Japan in that area that could be blocked if an invasion happened. He'll want to make sure that his trade is secure for the country as well. There's also the issue of missiles. China fired 5 of them into Japanese waters earlier this year. North Korea has been firing an awful lot of them. In fact, it fired one just this morning again. It fired one over Japan earlier this year. Kishida is going to want to make sure, or at least ask Xi Jinping to try and assert some influence over Pyongyang to try and curb its progress towards a nuclear device as well. And so there's a lot to talk about. And these two leaders have a lot of road ahead of them. Xi Jinping is going to be a leader for another 5 years. Kishida doesn't have an election for another 3 years. And so even though this is the first meeting, there's a lot of steps to be taken between these two leaders going forward.
Well, it's interesting how you put it, Chris. Will the two leaders address the Taiwan-shaped elephant in the room? Also, as you rightly pointed out, North Korea is an issue that is likely to come up significantly in these talks, given the missile launches that are happening practically on a daily basis. But given the nature of these prickly issues that the two sides will be addressing, realistically, what do the two delegations really hope to achieve from these talks? Do they believe there can be significant progress?
Well, analysts I've spoken to have said, hey, please do not expect a lot of deliverables from this. There are a lot of disputes between these two countries and a lot of things to address. We may not see anything actually taken away that's concrete from this meeting, but much like Xi and Joe Biden's talks the other week, the US president, analysts have said it's good that they're talking. It's good that people are communicating, that these world leaders are communicating. But having said that, there are very real positives. The second arm of the relationship of China and Japan is trade. Last year, there was $320 billion of trade between them. China accounts for more than 20% of Japan's imports, almost a quarter of its exports. It's critical for the economy, which, by the way, is not doing very well at the moment. There are other issues they work on together, such as climate change. A healthy student exchange program had developed before the pandemic, which really put a damper on the relationship in terms of the economic binding between these two countries. Security really rose to the surface. So they will be looking to reaffirm that economic that partnership. And really the critical issue for these two in the talks tonight is going to be, how do we walk this path going forward between being security rivals effectively, but business partners. Going forward, how do we work together to achieve that? That is going to be the main theme of their conversations tonight.
Security rivals, but potential business partners. Well, that does seem like an apt summary of this prickly relationship. We'll have to wait and see how much progress is actually made, but certainly an important meeting nonetheless. Thanks so much, Chris Gilbert, for getting us all those details.